Good morning, everybody. I want to welcome everyone to today's CERA webinar, Expanding Application Opportunities for Academic Return on Investment Analysis, presented by our colleagues here at Fresno Unified. My name is Joe Valero, and I'm the CERA board member, and I'll be covering a few housekeeping items before we hand you off to today's presentation. So first up, today, this is a Zoom meeting, not a Zoom webinar, which means you'll have the ability to come off mute. We did this so that our Q&A session at the end can be a little more engaging. Um, this only works, though, if we can all just make sure we are please monitoring our mute buttons. We have CERA board members standing by to help mute people if we accidentally come off mute during the presentation today. So please, once again, to the best of our abilities, just want to make sure we keep ourselves on mute so this format works for all of us. Speaking of Q&A, please hold your questions for the dedicated Q&A session at the end of today. At that time, we'll ask people to raise their hands in Zoom, and we'll call on people to come off mute and ask their questions. That way, we're not going over and talking over each other. Here's some hot news, fresh news. So the CERA registration has opened for our upcoming conference on November 4th through 6th in Palm Desert. And I'm actually going to place that into the chat right now. This is much earlier than what we have done in the past. So you're probably saying to yourself, my goodness, it feels like it's coming along a lot sooner. Yes. So we just opened it up. I believe it opened yesterday. So thank you, Nikki, for going over, getting that into the chat. And so lots of different sessions out there. Just a reminder for everyone, last year's, our colleagues from CSIS, they had some CalPADS presentations out there. There were presentations around differentiated assistance, assessment and accountability, lots of data visualizations, CERS rostering, and more. So if that's something that really interests you and you're ready to go over and get those submitted sooner, there are early bird specials. And so once again, that is in the chat already for us. So thank you, Nikki. And lastly, we are recording this webinar today, so we do plan to post it to the CERA YouTube channel, and we'll let you know once that's been posted. And so that wraps up our note keeping right now. And so I do see our president here, Antoinisha Williamson. And so I'm going to turn it over to her for a few words if she'd like to go over and say a few things.
Thank you, Joe. Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to welcome you all to our first webinar of the year. And again, Nikki posted the registration link in the chat box. So now you are able to register for our upcoming conference. And the theme this year is Equity by Design. So we are excited. We also released the call for proposals too. So if you have anyone who has any research that they would like to submit, please, the link is open. And I'm going to shoot it back over to you, Joe. Thank you. Thank you all for being here.
All right. Thanks, Ant. All right. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our two presenters today, Andrew Hendricks and Christy Imbiri Olivares from Fresno Unified School District. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew.
Thank you so much, Joe, and thank you everybody for being here. Really excited to get this opportunity to share about our work. Like Joe said, today the title of our webinar is Expanding Application Opportunities for Academic Return on Investment Analysis. We're here from Fresno Unified School District, and let's jump in. So just a little bit about who we are. Christy and I both work at the Project Management Office of Fresno Unified School District's IT department. Christy, unfortunately, is not currently able to be here because our district is hiring for a new CTO, and she is on that panel. So, it's just kind of an unfortunate timing thing that came up. We're really hoping she'll be able to join during the webinar, but we'll kind of just see what happens. But Christy began working at Fresno Unified about 6 years ago. She initially oversaw the Office of Research, Evaluation, and Assessment. Her background is in research and program evaluation. And she moved, and she also was really involved with some academic return on investment work that I will share more about during her time in that office. And then she moved to IT about 3 years ago during a district reorganization, and she kind of was brought there to stand up a new project management office, but also to bring academic return on investment to IT. Um, Christy hired me in the summer of 2024 to support with academic return on investment implementation in the department. I am a former educator. I worked in the South Bronx of New York City for 15 years as a middle school teacher and assistant principal, which was I'm very proud of. And I was kind of the school's data person. I decided I really wanted to make data the focal point of my career, took a data science boot camp and joined the strategic data project where I became a fellow. It's a 2 year fellowship. And so that was basically how I ended up in Fresno Unified School District with Christy. The project that we were working on was AROI implementation in IT, and that's pretty much the story that I'm going to be sharing with you. So just a little bit about our district. Fresno Unified is the third largest district in California. There are over 67,000 students and 8,000 staff as of the 2024-25 school year. And let's get into some of the context of our work. So before I arrived at Fresno Unified in the summer of 2024, the district had had a pretty extensive partnership with a group called DM Group. And the purpose of this partnership was to create a foundation for academic return on investment across the district. This work began with an initiatives inventory where all across the district, leaders submitted their major initiatives, and the whole district got to see like an entire inventory of all the initiatives that were going on. They also worked with the district to do 3 model academic return on investment analyses to try to illustrate how the process works using real programs from the district. And there was also a lot of work done around capacity building about AROI key concepts. On the left, the Exhibit 1, this is from the case study that DM Group published about their work with Fresno Unified. It just shows kind of a method for estimating true costs of programs for staff time specifically. That was part of the training that they did. So there was a lot of foundation work done before I got there that centered on this work between DM Group and the district. Um, However, there were still kind of opportunities to expand AROI application, and that was why Christy created this project and brought me in. So one of the ways that we really wanted to kind of expand this work was around operations. It was somewhat challenging, and as we get into like the background of what AROI is and how it works, this might become a little clearer. But just to kind of share the overall context in which we were working, um, it was challenging in operational departments at times to kind of see how programs influenced instructional outcomes, student outcomes, because that influence tended to be indirect. And we'll kind of break that down a little more later on. There was also, like along those lines, opportunities for additional capacity building and trying to train more people within the system to understand what this work is, understand its benefits, how to do it. Um, there were opportunities to just try to create spaces for people who might not be ready to do the full process, but who might want a few key practices just to help them get started. Like if we're not doing anything around a certain program, maybe we want to just try one piece of this if we're not ready to do the whole full thing. And there were opportunities just for kind of developing that trust, familiarization with AROI, showing people its benefits, showing, we're not here to shut down your program or, basically that's not the point. So there was a lot, that kind of Christy and I took on, and these were really the focal points of our work together. So that sets the stage for our agenda today. The purpose of our session is we're going to begin by just sort of reviewing some general context about AROI to share some background knowledge and how we tried to practice AROI in our context and why. And then also just a lot of it is going to be sharing experiences that and I had as we tried to implement AROI analysis in our IT department and kind of this operational setting where AROI maybe often is not really as closely affiliated as with more instructional programs. So we'll be beginning with that background context, sharing our analyses, just synthesizing some lessons learned, sharing a few resources that really helped us on our journey, and then we'll leave it open for a Q&A. So before we go any further, if we could just take 1 second to share a real quick introduction in the chat, just to get a better sense of who's here. If you could share your name, your organization, and what you hope to get out of this session. And we are going to find out if I am proficient enough in Zoom to monitor the chat. Yeah, okay, great. But yeah, if you could please just take a quick moment, introduce yourself, your organization, what you're hoping to get out of today's session. Just give a quick sense of kind of who's here and what we're hoping to get from this time today. Okay. All right. Awesome. Okay, seeing a lot of kind of general understanding, just better understanding of AROI. If it could be useful, just curiosity, love it. This is awesome. Okay, celebrating the great work you all have done. Thank you. I appreciate your faith. Hopefully we live up to that. Just learning more about. Okay, great. It seems like a lot of kind of like general knowledge, and yeah, I really hope that we are able to supply that, and also through the storytelling, just give you kind of a case study of real world experience, just, for the good and the bad, what happened when we tried this, what worked, what didn't, what we learned. Hopefully that will help support all of that. Okay, great. Thank you so much. And you can keep those coming in the chat. I'm gonna just move on now into our first topic here. What is AROI? So, AROI, like many things in education, you might hear different people say this acronym and be referring to many different things. So, I'm going to try to set the stage for how we understand AROI, why we went with that understanding, and just sort of try to ground it in a history of AROI to kind of show like how we ended up where we did. So the earliest reference to academic return on investment, or AROI, that we've been able to find is in a 2011 piece, an article called Academic ROI, What Does the Most Good? This is written by Nate Levinson, who at the time was the superintendent of a school district. He was also an MBA. And in the article, he kind of describes this mentality that he was seeing within education, which was basically when the district went to evaluate its programs, there was this idea of like, if the program could even help just one student, then how could we like reduce it or cut it or make any changes to it? There was this kind of like the burden of evidence was this hypothetical potential for a program to help even one student, right? And so for him, he was saying the bar really needs to be a lot higher. We need to be directing resources to programs not just that could help one student, but that do help many students. If we're more strategic with how we invest our resources, we can make a much stronger impact across the field. And so, being an MBA, he brought this metric of learning increase times number of students helped divided by money spent, which is, very aligned to sort of a businessy understanding of ROI. And he wanted to just give people a straightforward way to calculate, like, okay, we're spending this much money to get this impact. We can compare different programs along this single metric that we can, do a lot of different comparisons this way, and we can kind of try to guide our resources to the initiatives that are producing the greatest results. So fast forward a decade, And this is when, Fresno is working with DM Group, who Levinson, the author of the previous article, actually went on to become the president of. But this is again from their case study of their work with Fresno Unified. I know it's a bit blurry, so sorry about that. But what you're seeing is these are some of the outcomes for an AROI analysis on a student mental health initiative. And you can see it, none of them are that one single metric of learning increase times number of students helped divided by cost. What we have instead is a more disaggregated reporting by different student groups. And we're looking at outcomes more in a disaggregated, nuanced way by different stakeholder groupings rather than just that one all-inclusive single metric. Another part of what came out of that work was in our time working with DM Group. Well, this is before my time. So in Christy's time working with DM Group, there was also a lot of qualitative data involved. There were focus groups, there were interviews, and so what had begun as sort of this, single metric way to get a sense of program cost effectiveness became a more nuanced, holistic look at program evaluation that included stakeholder perceptions, student groupings, multiple outcomes, etc. And so when when I'm referring to AROI throughout this presentation, and I'm speaking to the process that Christy and I tried to use in our implementation in IT, this is what I'm speaking to, this more kind of nuanced approach with a broader range of evidence that really gets at these three questions from DM Group. Is this working, for whom, and at what cost? And so when I'm referring to AROI and what we did, this is really what we went with. And that was for multiple reasons. One was, and this is again from an article from DM Group, but one was that for AROI, it's really all about guiding strategic decisions. It's intentionally action oriented. It intends to provide timely, relevant evidence to help make a decision about a program. So, in a lot of cases, what can happen with program evaluation is there's sort of this binary thinking of keep or eliminate. And maybe that might be determined by evidence, but it also might be determined by political support. Maybe there's a sponsor for the program who is really attached to it, and then that person leaves. And so we're saying, oh, do we keep it? Do we cut it? But what AROI wants to do is to really expand the range of options of the kinds of decisions we can make about programs. So for instance, we might find that it's a really successful program and want to expand it, or we might find that it's more successful for some student groups than for others, and we want to, try to fix those less successful elements while, highlighting those more successful elements. So because the kind of whole purpose of doing the AROI analysis is to expand the range of strategic decisions that we can make about a program, it really made sense for us to use this more nuanced approach with the multiple metrics, the qualitative data, stakeholder perceptions. And also, we made that choice because there was already that training, that foundation of knowledge from the work between DM Group and the district, and we wanted to leverage that rather than sort of, recreating the wheel or going with something different. So that is basically a quick background in what I'm referring to when I speak about AROI, where that definition comes from, why we practice the version that we do. And now I really want to transition into sharing our actual AROI analyses. So to kind of get into the methodology a little bit more clearly, and the content that I'm about to share also this is a guide that DM Group has published about how to do AROI analyses. So this is not an original concept that Christy and I created. This comes from the following art. And by the way, all the references to all these things I'm speaking about, they're at the end of the presentation. So if anyone wants to learn more about this stuff, which I really recommend, there's a lot of great resources out there. You can use that references slide to dig into this stuff a little deeper. But I'll just break down kind of the overall process that we used when doing our analyses. So first, there is a planning phase, and really what this consists of is In our case, this was a department leader. It could also be a district leader, selecting a strategically important program that we want to evaluate, right? We want to make sure we're choosing a program that there's a significant investment in that affects many students, something that we're going to really, we're making a big resource investment, and we really think it's worth it to study this more closely. And what kind of happens from there once the target program is selected is that analysts are going to work with program leads to clarify program objectives and plan the analysis. In some cases, maybe the program objectives have already been defined, maybe they have not, but that's a process that needs to happen. And then, based on those objectives, we're going to plan an analysis to gather evidence of the extent to which those objectives are or are not being met. The second phase of the process is collecting and analyzing evidence. And this is where the analysts are going to gather and analyze, and again, in our case, it was essential to have quantitative, qualitative, and cost data. We were using a mixed methods kind of approach. And so that's, the middle phase there, collecting and analyzing our evidence to learn more about the program outcomes and its cost effectiveness. And then finally, in the final phase, it is time to share findings and act. So this is where the analysts collaborate with the program leads again to prepare finding for reporting. It's really important to have the program leads involved here to help interpret the results because they may know things that the analyst does not know. And so it's always really, really important to highlight the collaborative nature of this work and to make it kind of a collective effort. And once those insights have been prepared for reporting, the findings are then shared with the leaders who sponsored the analysis to determine whatever the next action steps are going to be taken about the program. So, again, really want to focus on that action-oriented piece. Even if the action is to keep the program the same, we want to make the process should end not with a presentation, but with a concrete decision about, what we're doing for the program. So that is really kind of the process that we took from the work that we were doing with DM Group. This slide kind of illustrates a few adjustments that we made for our specific context and working in an IT department, which is more operational, where again, because the programs influence student outcomes a little more indirectly, we had to make some strategic choices about how to adapt the process to suit our needs. And so, really what we did that was, I think kind of more of our own adjustment. First, the outcome measures that we used could include those that affect learning indirectly. And to kind of illustrate what I mean and why, here's an example of a program that we analyzed, but we took a look. One of our major analyses was looking at a student laptop one-to-one initiative. And one of the things that the analysis revealed was that there was a high volume of breakage. And so we were initially looking at this as sort of a maintenance issue. There were high costs affiliated with breakage and repairing the breaks, getting students new computers. But when we surveyed stakeholders, what we found and what they told us very, very often was that what was surfacing to us as broken laptops to them was experienced as students arriving to class with a non-functional laptop. The student has to go to the library, losing class time, to ask for a loaner. In many cases, the librarian has no loaner available, so the student still has no laptop. The student returns to class having lost that time, and because they have no laptop, they may need to have an alternate activity, maybe a worksheet or something that, is not the same activity that the rest of the class is doing. And this process could repeat if the student regularly forgets their laptop or their charger. This process could just repeat kind of often on and on and on, right? And so there's this instructional cost to what appears to us as maintenance issues. And that's why it was very challenging to basically say, okay, if we were to reduce the broken laptops, will students get better at finding the main idea or being able to solve, an algebraic equation? It's not so one-to-one, but there is an instructional component, and it was very important for us to try to honor that and try to draw that connection while also recognizing we might not be able to find kind of a perfect metric that captured that relationship. So that's where we really leaned on stakeholder perceptions to help inform the academic impact of these more operational programs and emphasized the educational environment over specific instructional targets, right? Because we know that relationship exists, but we also, recognized finding like the perfect metric to capture it might be quite challenging. So now we're gonna just take a look at a few different analyses that we did. And the first one we're gonna look at is a school site refresh program. And just to give a little context of what the program is and why it existed, basically, for this program, before it existed, school leaders had to purchase devices for staff who were outside of a formal refresh. So this could be the main office staff, this could be the administration team, this could be the many different job titles other than teacher, paraprofessional, who had previously been served already by a different refresh program. And so that was the responsibility of the school leaders to perform. This was an issue because it created yet another non-academic task for administrators, and also limited data quality and created the potential for inequitable access where there was really no centralized way to see who had access to a device and who didn't, which, obviously creates the opportunity for some people just not to have access at all. And kind of like a rallying cry for why this non-academic task piece was so important is that there's an IES study that they looked at elementary principals and did time logs of how they spend their time and found that 60% of the principal's time was spent on non-instructional tasks. So, I can speak from personal experience as an assistant principal. I think, unfortunately, my percentage would have maybe been even higher than 60%. But yeah, it's a really big issue, and we wanted to try to reduce that by introducing this program. So um, we IT began the school site refresh in the summer of 2024. The purpose was to kind of centralize the process, take it off the hands of the school leaders, and just do it as a centralized district-led IT process. And the purpose of doing that was to support principals in reallocating their time and budget to student-centered priorities, to provide equitable access to technology across job titles, and to maintain operational efficiency and high quality of service while the project was going on. So kind of the first part in the planning phase, and you can see I'm just trying to kind of track us along that AROI process at the bottom, just to keep us like on track of what's going on, when, and why. The first process of this was meeting with the program leads to create the objectives and definitions of success of what the program was intending to accomplish and what we were hoping to see as far as outcomes when we did the analysis. Part of this process also involved designing some new data collection tools. There was a post-refresh survey that we created for site leaders to collect their perceptions of the impact of the program. There was also a pre-existing feedback survey that went out to all staff who were refreshed to try to just get their satisfaction and their perceptions of the program. So moving into the collecting and analyzing evidence, what we use to estimate the cost, especially for the devices and for staff time, there were hours and inventory logs that the program team had kept. And so we use those to create estimates for both the staff time and the materials cost of the program during the time we were analyzing. And what we found at the end when we looked at the outcomes were basically that the program had excellent operational outcomes. The average satisfaction rating from staff members was a 4.95 out of 5. There was a lot of open-ended feedback about the professionalism of the refresh crew, how patient people were being. Really a lot of positive feedback about that. The project was also under budget and ahead of schedule. What initially began as a 4-year projection, because of the team, becoming more efficient and understanding kind of how to do the process, faster and faster, they're actually going to complete in less than 3 years, despite an initial 4-year projection. But we also, what happened was we had insufficient evidence to evaluate kind of the impact of the program and some of the outcomes that were more based on trying to reduce the time and budget reallocation for those site leaders. So one reason for we were only able to collect 8 survey responses out of a potential 41 sites refreshed to get those perceptions. And what kind of came out of that was it was just the evidence was unclear. There was very limited evidence, but of what we received, perceptions were positive that the program reduced time and budget for non-instructional tasks, but they were also mixed about being able to reallocate the time and budget to student-centered priorities. So one last kind of body of evidence that we found about the program was that it did serve quite a few job titles that because there was no pre-existing data, we can't be sure that the program expanded access to job titles that previously had not had device access. But there are a lot of job titles that it is likely that, now, well, we can say now with certainty that do have access. And in of the 8 responses from school leaders, all of them did respond yes, that the process expanded device access across job titles in their school. So that was a positive finding for the program. So what kind of came of all of this? Really, as a result of the findings, IT leadership decided to keep the program as is, to explore options, to basically it was the main discussion was about can we collect more data to get a broader base of evidence about the program. And there were a lot of really rich questions. Part of the discussion was, is it worth the cost and principal time to keep asking to survey them? We had initially actually wanted to do interviews, but principals expressed just district-wide that they were being asked too much to like give their perceptions to district-wide programs. And so, if the whole point was to reduce time spent on non-academic tasks, well, sending more surveys, doing more interviews, that's a non-academic task, right? And so there was a lot of just kind of rich discussion about how we wanted to proceed with the evidence collected. But ultimately, the decision was to continue the program as is. The second program I want to share about was our one-to-one student laptop program. And so the background here is that Fresno adopted a one-to-one student laptop model during the pandemic and also continued to sustain it in the years following the pandemic. It was viewed within IT as a big part of the district's commitment to digital equity for all students. And so that was kind of why it continued in the years after the pandemic. However, there were a lot of maintenance issues. Breakage was high, loss was high. We were not 100% at that time able to quantify exact figures due to some data quality issues, which I'll get into. But issues were known to exist, and so we decided to explore the program a little bit more deeply and do an AROI analysis to try to understand kind of is there an intervention we can introduce to try to reduce breakage and loss? We were thinking at that time about things like screen protectors or laptop cases, right? But we just wanted to learn more about what was happening and see if we could try to intervene in a positive way. So one of the big challenges here was, like I said, data quality, and this was for 2 different reasons. One was that some of the data, was collected during the pandemic era. I don't know if anyone here was in a school at that time or working in a school district, but it was, you know, I'll speak from my experience working in New York City. The emphasis was much more on like trying to respond to an emergency and get everybody the equipment they needed rather than like doing perfect data collect. It was emergency response. And so that was one of the challenges that data came from that time, right? Before there were really like the strongest data systems appropriately, we needed to respond to this crazy educational emergency. But another really big challenge was that we were using back-end data from our asset management software, and there were a lot of null and duplicate records that needed to be parsed through to be able to create accurate estimates of what was happening. So that involved cleaning over 3 million historical laptop maintenance records and really, digging into all the idiosyncrasies that existed to try to get an accurate estimate of what was going on. Another thing we did at that time was survey staff, students, and families to learn more about the causes of breakage. We tried to attend, that's our PMO team. We tried to attend family engagement events to survey families, improve representativeness. But yeah, we gathered over the course of about 5 months, we gathered, perceptions evidence as well as the laptop maintenance records to assess the state of the program. And then lastly, for costs, we worked with our warehouse manager who helped us create cost estimates for each break type and also estimate the frequency of each break type to create estimates translating the data we had about the maintenance issues that were occurring into actual cost estimates for what that maintenance was costing the district on an annual basis. And so this all was kind of done more or less to create a baseline to understand what an effective intervention might be, but the findings ended up being quite powerful and actually like inspired a pretty large change. So one of the things we found from our perceptions data was that frustrations from staff and families were quite apparent when we did a thematic analysis of survey responses. An elementary librarian shared about teachers scrambling every day to borrow a loaner laptop. They have none to lend. A family member was, this is a fairly representative response, not asking us not to have students take laptops home, keep them in school. Backpacks are too heavy. Right? Parents being responsible for damages done by students. So yeah, the survey analysis really showed kind of the level of stakeholder frustration with the program and how it tied to actual instruction. And this was especially true at the elementary level, where we found the most common response for teachers was that it was not necessary for students to bring laptops home. That decreased with each level of schooling, level of, from middle to high school as well. But yeah, elementary, the volume of problems and the volume of dissatisfaction was highest. And so we found that as a particular focus. And lastly, we were able to take our analysis of the maintenance issues and create a dashboard to really illustrate the costs. And we found that the costs were, greater than expected, especially in the elementary level. And it really, all of these factors combined to create a much stronger sense of urgency when we said, okay, wow, these are really not just maintenance issues, they're instructional issues. And we're investing a lot into this program that we're seeing really significant stakeholder dissatisfaction. So those findings reframed the problem. And what ended up happening was IT recommended a return to class sets for elementary schools in the summer of 2025. And that recommendation actually was approved. And so this year, elementary student laptops returned to class sets. It has been a large project, but basically the way it is working is each classroom is receiving a cart if they don't already have one, and a 10% surplus of devices above enrollment to reduce disruptions if anything does break. There are loaners there to give students just in case. We resurveyed teachers, elementary staff members, elementary teachers before we made the change, and 80% said that they believed the change would increase instructional time or that they already required laptops to remain in school. Like some schools and some teachers just beat us to the punch and were doing this themselves because they were so frustrated with the previous way the program was happening. And so all in all, the project involves returning 69 elementary schools across 7 regions back to class sets. It has been going on since November and will end in May. And there was a one-time cost to do this of $8 million to fund the laptops and the carts and, the time that is going into doing this. But this was really just one of many parts of the intervention. There were also many others, and I'm just looking at time, so I'll try to move a bit quicker. Uh, there were many other interventions that came out of this, including an updated acceptable use policy, training resources for how to apply fines, a student device dashboard that schools now have access to information about student laptops that they hadn't previously had, a student device success plan, and among other interventions. So there were many things came out of the analysis. Um, Now, as far as that leading to the final part of our analysis, which was actually seeing the intervention and did it create the impact we were hoping. So again, the first part of our process here was really defining the intended outcome, selecting metrics, and defining what success would look like for each of those. Um, we also revised the dashboard that we used to be tracking the issues that we were seeing to include operational data about returned, frozen, and deployed laptops, which I think was really important for our operations team to have access to that information. And we developed new surveys, one for the day of and one for 1 month later, to gather stakeholder perceptions of how, instruction has gone, how the classroom environment is now that the change has occurred. So as far as findings go, most staff and families have expressed satisfaction. We'll break this down a little bit more on a future slide. The concerns that have been expressed have really focused on two main things, which is laptop quality and home access to laptops. We're going to explore this a little bit further on a future slide, so I'm just going to keep it moving for right now. Um, and then as far as the breakage, loss, and maintenance costs, those have been drastically decreased at schools that have returned to class sets. That's RTC. So looking at that top row, basically what we did is we compared schools that have returned to class sets this year to themselves 1 year ago during the same time frame from the date of their installation of the class sets to today's date, either this year or 1 year ago today. And the number of returns for repairs that have occurred reduced by 97%. Losses and thefts completely have not occurred at those schools. And then the affiliated costs of those maintenance issues has also reduced by 97%. So there was a very large reduction in those maintenance issues that we were trying to target. And so one other big finding that we had was that due to those decreases in maintenance costs, the projected savings of making this change, um, just doing kind of a really basic projection, should exceed the cost of the implementation and doing the intervention within about 2 to 3 years. So even though it did require a one-time cost to do, ultimately, in the years to come, this should really help, like from a cost effectiveness point of view with the program. So overall, those outcomes, like I was saying, just to return to those, to get into the survey data a little bit deeper, currently 84% of staff have indicated either that the change going back to class sets has increased instructional time or that instructional time has remained stable, and 90% of staff have basically indicated that equitable access has increased because of the change or remained stable. And so to have either it's remaining stable or to increase while drastically reducing the cost, that was, really positive to see. Additionally, 69% have indicated that they are either satisfied or highly satisfied when we've surveyed them 1 month after their return to class sets, and 57% of families indicated the same. So now where that has led us is to try to address those big core concerns of the laptop quality and in the home access. We do have, we have thoughts on how home access can occur. We really want to make sure that that is communicated clearly from the responses we received. It seems like there are questions about that. So part of it is just communicating what those strategies should be, how home access can be provided. Also, possibly exploring if a return to class sets could be beneficial at the middle school level, and then just thinking about our systems for monitoring the program and continuing to learn what we need to learn moving forward. So with that, I'll move into lessons learned and just kind of highlight some of the key things. This is not necessarily a lesson learned, but just one other thing to note. As we went through this process, we also created two resources that don't really line up with one specific analysis, but one thing we did was create an academic return on investment playbook that is IT themed specifically. A lot of the materials we used are not originals. Again, it's an internal resource. It's based on materials from DM Group, but all of our examples are IT themed and based on real analyses that occurred to try to, again, help with that issue of helping operational departments see themselves within this work. We also created and facilitated a 5-part in-person and video-based professional learning series for IT that focuses on building knowledge, building skills, and each session kind of provides a best practice that people can use. So even if people don't feel prepared to do the entire process, we tried to give them just, something to grab onto. You can do one piece of this and at least learn, something new about the program that you might not have learned otherwise. So there was a kind of a lot of capacity building and resource creation work that was going on alongside the analyses themselves. As far as like kind of synthesizing some things that we learned, overall, AROI really helped us add value, even in the unconventional context of IT, not evaluating a curriculum or a professional learning series with AROI, but evaluating, operational programs. We learned so much that we wouldn't have known without it. One thing that came out of this was just how important stakeholder engagement is. This in the student laptop analysis, it was really the survey responses that totally changed our understanding of the program and moved us to act and realize this wasn't just a maintenance issue. This was instructional and preventing students from accessing the lesson when they go to class. Also, just the importance of how evidence supports action. A lot of what we found was to some extent, known before we found it, but being able to actually put a number on it and create an estimate and, tell an evidence-based story rather than sort of relying on anecdotes, it really helped kind of move the decision-making process forward. One other piece was, do the next right thing, where basically a lot of times things didn't go the way we expected them to go. We didn't do, not every single thing happened exactly right or the way we had hoped, but it was really important just to sort of be optimistic, be forward looking, not be like, well, why did this happen? Or why have we, it's staying away from sunk costs and backwards looking and just looking to the future and saying, okay, here's where we are. What's the next right thing we can do was really important to keeping things moving in a positive direction. Um, I think one other thing was operations matter. Our analysis really didn't end with just findings. We also built out a lot of dashboards and views for our operational partners to help them do the actual implementation work, which I think was really important in building trust, where it's not like, hey, we just handed you these findings of all these things that could be better. Good luck, right? We actually continue to work with them and support them in actually implementing the solution that came out of the work. So I think that was really important. And lastly, yeah, just building trust, really, really important. Being transparent about how data will be used, developing the analysis plan collaboratively, never trying to blindside somebody. It should never be the case that we're kind of like reporting this finding to someone way up on the org chart and then blindsiding the person who helped you get the data to do that with some really negative thing that they had never seen before, right? So just, I think, making sure that we're being very honest in our reporting and just being, if there's negative findings, there's negative findings, and we're going to report that. But doing it in a way that builds trust rather than making people feel like, whoa, where did that come from? I thought, what it's very important to keeping goodwill alive. So as far as kind of what's next for us, we're really happy that there are a few new analyses coming up that are actually going to be led by our partners in IT from some other teams, using the resources that we created to kind of lead their own analyses of programs. So we are very excited to kind of support with that work, and that it's not just Christy and I leading these analyses, but also it's spreading throughout the department. Um, Continued capacity building to support people who are interested with learning more about the process and just sharing our work and trying to help people interested in doing this themselves. And continued implementation support with the process of, managing the one-to-one transition and supporting with data around that. So finally, I will close, I think almost on time, not quite, with a just quick resource share. There are so many great AROI resources out there that we drew on really heavily. And for a more complete look, again, you can look at this reference slide that just has, there's so much awesome information out there that we relied on really, really heavily in doing this. But three that really made a huge difference. One was this white paper by Nate Levinson from 2017. It really breaks down kind of the overall like ROI key concepts, best practices. It's it was just essential to us doing the work the way that we did. There's another resource that I referenced, I think, multiple times in the presentation, this guidebook from District Management Group that really provided a clear step-by-step guide to ROI analyses that, again, was just super, super essential to what we did. And lastly, this is a very different approach to AROI, but if when I introduced that first original kind of single metric concept of AROI, and that looked like something that could be useful, this is more oriented towards that or that definition of AROI, kind of the one metric approach, and really cool Jefferson County Public Schools, how they use AROI to evaluate their programs and do comparisons across programs. If you were interested in seeing kind of like that different way of doing it and what that could look like, really recommend that one. It was also a great resource. So that is it. I don't think I have spoken for that long consecutively in quite a long time. Uh, and I'm happy to wrap up. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Happy
Oh,
to take questions.
that was absolutely great. Thank you, Andrew. I don't know if you want to take a drink of water or something right now while we got some questions coming into the chat. Great information and just once again free, I think free learning for a lot of us. And I think it's giving us a lot of just different ideas of, how we might be able to infuse some of these concepts into our system. So with that being said, once again, feel free in the chat if you'd like, or we can also do a hand raising, whatever works best. And actually, I already see one question already popping up in the chat, and I see it's from Jason. And so it has to do with the portion you were talking about in terms of access. And so, was the loss of access for students at home, was it in terms of that accessibility?
So the question is, sorry, what is the question?
And this one might actually be easier with, I see Jason coming off mute. Perfect. I'll hand it over to Jason right
Okay.
now.
Hey, Andrew, sorry.
Hey.
Great job. I appreciate all the info and the transparency. A lot of this stuff happens behind the scenes. So to bring it out for us that do this kind of work was really informative. I'm curious, obviously, pulling back the devices are going to um, impact students at home. And so, and you mentioned that some other teams are already doing work. Was there any data collected around how many students or what percentage of students might completely lose access by pulling back the devices?
So, I guess basically, yeah, we didn't have that figure. But what we did see when we looked at the qualitative data was there were so many parent concerns about student use at home. Some of those centered on just having trouble like monitoring for parent, especially for parents who work or might not be present, that students are getting unsupervised use. Um, There were issues with parents coming home and seeing their students on games and feeling like it was an added, responsibility to try to make sure that they're being used for academic purposes. Um, we were just seeing so many different, basically parents expressing, please leave the laptops at school for a variety of different reasons. And so, what we want to be able to do is basically provide in cases where students are, like you're saying, really relying on that home device, and the parent wants them to have the home device, and everybody is kind of on the same page about this. Um, there are surplus devices, and we want to be able to use those to provide that access where that exists. Um, and so that's kind of where we're at. Like we want to be. I think there's a communication piece with us trying to share processes with schools, hearing from schools about what they're experiencing as they're doing this. Those processes need to be fleshed out, but it is something that we do intend to provide and should be able to provide as we move forward. But that's a great question.
Thank you.
All right, and it looks like we got another question just came in. Was the 8 million for new RTC devices or to refurbish those that have been one-to-one devices for the students in each class?
Yeah, good question. So that was basically there were a lot of classrooms that did not have carts, and they needed to be provided with carts. Again, it's 69 school sites across 7 different regions. Fresno is the third largest school district in California, so it's a very broad like reach when we're going to do these schools. And so it was a lot for carts, and it was a lot also for there were some. Basically, what needed to happen was some of the earliest regions we were refreshing needed new laptops because we needed time to collect the student laptops back and clean them and prepare them for use in a future district. So to get that rolling process started, there needed to be some new laptops just to provide as that collection, maintenance, repair, and then reissue process went along. So there was that, and there were also costs of like needing to hire some subs to help provide this additional maintenance work. So those were some, that's some an idea of some of the costs. Yeah.
Hmm. And we got another question coming in. Regarding the loss of access at home, are there any plans on changing instructions so that there isn't as much, or excuse me, there's not as much of a dependency to use a device at home?
Yeah, that is something like, when this was being first discussed at the cabinet level, that kind of discussion of if we can't guarantee that students have access to a device. Like there shouldn't necessarily should there be graded homework that relies on access to a home device, right? And so that's something where there's partnership across, IT, the instructional division. It's like a broader conversation to have happen. And I think it is one that is happening. I think that one of the things that we did see when we were just reviewing kind of broader research about laptop use was that the quality of implementation was one of the most important pieces. And so that's why we felt like we really wanted to highlight the classroom use when we have a teacher present, when it's happening within the context of planned instruction. That was where we could kind of bank on the highest implementation quality, and that was sort of like why the classroom became the priority.
Yeah. And I think to your point, you used the word broader. I think there's a broader conversation even happening across the state now,
Mhm.
probably even across the nation in terms of technology use. Any other questions for the group? Great questions.
Yes, thank you.
Once
Great
again,
questions.
really great information that you've shared and great resources. This is that awkward. Oh, I see Jake. Go ahead, Jake.
Yeah, I just got a quick question. I'm curious if just kind of looking in the future, do you have another project that you folks are thinking about evaluating? Do you have any kind of next steps? Just yeah, I would be interested to hear.
Yeah, so I referenced kind of those two programs that are going to be like we're going to be like supporting, but what we really want to try to see is like can others take these resources and these you know practices and try to expand across the department. So one of those that we're really excited about is like an esports program. that we're going to try to take a look at and collect some survey data from students, from coaches, and see, kind of beyond just like who wins and loses a given competition, like what are we actually investing into that program in terms of time, in terms of resources, what is it contributing to student sense of belonging, academics, like those kinds of things. So that's just one example of a program we're excited. Like we're in the process of kind of initiating that one right now. We're excited about. Good question.
I'm gonna say maybe there's gonna be a part two. I don't just I'd be really interested to know what the results are of that. Any other questions from anybody in the room right now? I'm gonna say it going once, and I see it. Okay, Pamela, please.
Thanks so much for this. I'm trying to make some connections with some more, let me just cut to the mental health grid at the start of your presentation. I'm trying to make the connections between some of the costs and the nuances. Can you speak a little bit on, stakeholder input and some of the ways that you expanded data gathering for that particular one, or where that came from?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. You're referring to that like early graphic for the school social work. Yeah. So I will say that was one of the analyses that DM Group actually performed. I wasn't a part of that one. It is published in the case study. So first this first one in the references, taking a strategic budgeting approach. DM Group published a case study of that whole process, and they did a great job of kind of like clarifying the methods that were used. So yeah, I'll lean on that, but yeah, hopefully that's okay because that one wasn't me. Yeah. Thank you for your good question.
All right, and any other questions? And while we're having those last second waiting here, Nikki, can you put the conference one more time into the chat? Once again, reminding everybody that the conference registration is open earlier this year. So if you'd like to start getting that process started, go ahead and click there. Also looking for proposals as well, to Ant's point earlier. So you can hear great presentations like what you're hearing from Andrew, and it's the whole, you'll hear, right? Sharing is caring. You're going to hear some great things that are happening in districts. And, it's not a matter of cookie cuttering, I think I made up a word, being cookie cutter with it, but going over and taking those different little pieces and elements and then going over and infusing them into your system. So, once again, you'll be able to go over and hear some really great things that are happening really across the state. What did decision makers respond to most in the findings from your analysis, and what did they find compelling?
Yeah, that is a really good question. So I would mostly for the student laptop one, right? Because the school site refresh, it kind of just, I think there was a real appreciation to get the evidence and the data and to see everything. But the one that really prompted like a large change in a policy was the student laptop one. I think it's that kind of holistic piece where you're having those different components of is this working for whom and at what cost? That it's all three of those elements where you're seeing like you're seeing qualitative information and seeing what families and staff members and students are saying. You're seeing quantitative information about what's actually occurring in terms of these maintenance issues, and you're seeing cost information that is really clarifying how many resources are being devoted to this thing. Like that combination of information was really powerful. And the last thing I think was just sort of the collaborative nature of how the work unfolded. Like when we were meeting with our CTO, Tammy Lumberg, who was just an amazing, awesome champ. I just like can't end the webinar without saying her name. She was such an awesome champion of this work. But like we were there with our program lead, Jeff Solano. We were there with the executive director of learning support, Don Swayanthisane, and like everybody had had kind of a role in looking at the data and saying, what are we going to do about this? Like, what are we, okay, we identified these problems. Like, how can we be solutions oriented and actually make a change? And the collaborative nature, the solutions oriented nature, I think those would be kind of like softer things, but they really like if we had come and just dumped a bunch of problems on on her table and been like, okay, well, good luck. Like, I don't think that really would have made an impact. It was like kind of having it be, hey, we found these things. We've got some ideas, like let's talk about it and let's figure out a path forward. I think that people really responded to that.
All right. Any other? Another one just came in. This work seems to require a good handle on data analysis. Can you make a recommendation for self-learning with data analysis? Anything you guys have been using?
Yeah, I will say, for some of this work, like you didn't see anything in here about, a p-value or an effect size. Like we did try to keep it pretty to like descriptive statistics more so than, like inferential statistics. Not to say there's anything wrong with inferential statistics, but we tried to use metrics that, like, if we could be like fairly interpretable and replicable by others who, might be interested in doing the process and don't have that statistics background. So like I'm just trying to think I'm trying to think like specifically of what we did and then what the resources would be. Like we used weighted averages sometimes. That might be there's so many great like Udemy has great stuff, Coursera has great stuff. So if it's more just like of a general background in descriptive and inferential statistics, those I've taken so many courses on there to help me like learn about this stuff. Really recommend both of those. If it's more specific concepts, yeah, I think like weighted averages were really helpful to know about. Um, yeah, I don't know. If you want to get more into the inferential statistics piece of it, then learning about like effect size, learning about p-value and statistical significance, those would be good core concepts to take a look at. But hopefully that's helpful. I don't know. I'm just I'm just blabbering at this point.
No, I love it. And
That's
it's kind
helpful.
of funny if my colleague Corey Greenlaw, a lot of you probably know who he is. He has a presentation. It's called Stats Are Sexy. And I bet he'd think this is really sexy right now. So yeah, great questions, everybody. And so we're going to get ready to wrap up right here. So just want to thank everybody for being here. And so we really want to thank Andrew and your colleagues over at Fresno Unified for the great work you guys have done. I don't know if anybody has really gone in and dug in, but it was really a lot of the initiatives that Andrew was presenting on today. It was a big issue, not issue, excuse me. It was a big thing over here with our local media. I think it even ended up on EdSource as well. So you'll see
It
some
did.
articles about what he's presenting on out here. So once again, we really want to thank you for going over, sharing your knowledge, sharing your journey. And once again, it's one of these, as we're all here and as we're listening to just the different journeys, what might we be able to take to go over and weave in, plug into our systems. And so we want to thank everybody for being here today. Once again, thank you, Andrew. And I hope everybody has a great rest of the day. Oh, before we do, actually, this will be posted. This recording will be posted here in a couple of weeks on the CERA website, so along with the presentation as well. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. So with that, have a great rest of the day, everyone, and
Thank you so
hope you
much,
have a great
everybody.
weekend. All right. Thank you, guys.